Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I'm going to be continuing my rework prediction series, this time talking about Tryndamere. And for those of you who know me, Tryndamere has a very special place in my heart because I hate him. I am absolutely just loathe Tryndamere's design. I think it's one of the worst design kits that Riot have ever had. It has not aged very well at all, but I disliked Tryndamere even back when I first started playing the game. I just don't feel like the character has very much in the realm of counterplay or ability to do much of anything if he does fall behind. He's the kind of character where if he's behind, he is literally 100% completely useless. If he's ahead, there's basically nothing you can ever do about what Tryndamere is trying to do to you or your towers. Just an absolutely miserable champion design, and a design that even Riot acknowledges is a problem. A few years ago, Riot actually basically said, we have to make Tryndamere good at split pushing, because it's the only thing he's allowed to be good at, so he needs to be really good at it. We can't buff him in team fights, we can't buff him in being able to do anything outside of go to a side lane and kill towers, because if we do, he'll be completely unhealthy for the game, and there's just not that much in the realm of counterplay that we can then add to Tryndamere's kit right now. Terribly, terribly designed, and absolutely the kind of character that I'm very excited to eventually see reworked. So let's go ahead and talk about some more of the reasons why I think Tryndamere is so poorly designed. First, Tryndamere's kit has a surprising lack of counterplay, especially when compared to modern champions. Tryndamere has one damaging ability. You might not have done the math before, but that's right. Spinning Slash is the only ability he has that even remotely can damage you, and everything else in Tryndamere's kit just makes him into a ball of stats. This also means that the majority of Tryndamere's damage output comes from auto-attacking, which I've talked about at length before in some of these other rework videos, but suffice to say, auto-attacking is one of the least interesting forms of DPS in the game, especially because if there were not crit in the game, an auto-attacker versus an auto-attacker would be something that you could math out. You could know in advance, Caitlyn level 6, Jhin level 6, both have no crit, they auto-attack each other. You could do the math and say exactly who would win. It's exceedingly boring. It's one of the reasons why Tryndamere has crit on his kit in the first place, in order to help differentiate his auto-attacking playstyle to some degree. However, Riot even messed this up because Tryndamere's crit chance is obviously just chance. You can't guarantee that you're going to be able to crit. And as a result, there are situations where Tryndamere will spin at you at level 2, and he fails to crit you, and you kill him because he didn't have his important steroid, because he just didn't roll the dice well enough, he didn't get lucky enough to beat you. Or there are times where Tryndamere will spin at you at level 2, crit you 3 times in a row, and win the trade automatically, and there was literally nothing you could do about it because, again, it was a roll of the dice. Tryndamere happened to get lucky, he happened to crit you 3 times, and that gave him the important edge and damage that he wanted. I don't think that this is particularly healthy for League of Legends. I also don't think it's particularly well designed to basically be telling Tryndamere players, hey, your entire output in the early stages of the game is based on whether or not you crit, and there's no way for you to guarantee that. There's no way for your opponent to outplay it, but there's no way for you to outplay them. You're just basically spinning at them and saying, hey, I sure hope this random chance effect actually goes off. I also think that some of Tryndamere's abilities aren't particularly well designed, Bloodlust in particular. I do like the certain degree of Fury being stacked up for a DPS steroid that you can then consume all of it to heal yourself. That's kind of a neat interaction, but it just feels like such a non-button that I would much rather get rid of it and use the slot for something else. And Mocking Shout is an ability that frustrates me to no end. It's an ability very similar to Aurelia's old E, Equilibrium Strike, which would stun you if the health percentages of you and her were at a certain level. I don't remember if you needed to be lower than her or if you needed to be higher than her, but suffice to say, it never worked the way you thought it would. As Aurelia, you dash on an opponent and press E, and then they wouldn't get stunned, and you'd be like, what, but their health percentages, or the other way around. You'd say, there's no way my health was higher than Aurelia's, but I still got stunned anyways. It wasn't a very fun ability, because trying to math it out in the middle of a fight just wasn't very interesting, and Tryndamere's Mocking Shout is very similar to that. There are a lot of times where I feel like I have turned around to avoid getting Mocking Shouted, only to get slowed anyways, and then you're in an even worse situation because you stopped running away from Tryndamere overall. And I don't know why Mocking Shout slows you. It feels like, if anything, if Tryndamere's making fun of you, you'd like get taunted or something. I know why Tryndamere can't afford to have hard CC like that, but generally speaking, it's just a very frustrating ability. Not least of which because of the AD Shred, which is in a very generous area of effect, and just, there's no counterplay to it. Tryndamere spins at you, you're in range, he presses W, and you're 40 AD lower than you were before for essentially no reason, because Tryndamere pressed W, and I guess that's fine. There are some things about Tryndamere that I do quite like. I think that the idea of a stacking resource that at maximum stacks gives you a ton of benefits, I think is interesting. As I've talked about before, Bloodlust giving him some degree of tension as to maintaining his DPS steroid or using it to heal himself is kind of neat. I think Spinning Slash generally works for me. As silly as the ability's animation is, I think it works fine as a damaging ability that you can use to either get in range for a Mocking Shout or in order to attempt to run away. The ability for it to have its cooldown reset on auto-attacking but doubled on crit is another thing that I think allows Tryndamere to be mobile but not necessarily give him insane amounts of map mobility. It's one of the things that you've even seen with something like Fiora, where Lunge has a long cooldown, but if you hit a target, the cooldown is very low. That kind of thing I really like because it means that these champions have mobility in fights but not necessarily just a ton of mobility in general. Undying Rage is iconic. There's no argument about it. I think it's a phenomenally cool ability, even though it does have some counterplay issues in general, but I really like what Undying Rage does for the game, and Riot are absolutely going to be maintaining it. There are things I like about Tryndamere, but I think that there are a lot of things that we also need to do in order to fix him. So let's talk about some of these fixes. Now, speaking specifically from Riot's words in the most recent Champion VGU poll, they said that they want to preserve his split-pushing identity with crit item scaling. They want to keep his kit straightforward and simple, along with his iconic ultimate, but they want to take a look at his healing, his early power expression, and his effectiveness in teamfights. My changes are, generally speaking, along these lines. I don't know that I necessarily tried to look at his healing especially, or his early power expression, but definitely I'm trying to keep Tryndamere a simple champion. I think Tryndamere players want him to remain a fairly easy-to-play right-click-based champion, and I think that, generally speaking, he should maintain the crit item scaling because of this. Crit is one of those things that makes auto-attacking somewhat interesting, so if he's going to remain simple, and therefore mostly right-click based, he has to keep crit on his kit somewhere. However, I've overhauled his passive so he's not as dependent on the coin flip of do I crit you at level 2 or not. Tryndamere's passive generates Fury on attacks like it does before, and generates more crit, or more Fury on a crit, same as before. However, Fury now gives attack speed based on how much Fury he has, instead of critical strike chance. He also no longer has the bonus AD at low health passive that he had on Bloodlust, though I'm not necessarily opposed to adding that back to his kit in some form. Now, however, at maximum Fury, Tryndamere's auto attacks deal bonus damage based on his critical strike chance. Basically, every attack he makes at maximum Fury is a crit, but he does reduce crit damage, which then scales with critical strike chance. This was the easiest way for me to phrase it, similar to how Ashe works, where Ashe doesn't crit you. Instead, she does bonus damage to frosted targets based on her critical strike chance. That's sort of what I'm going for here. What this means, then, is that building crit gives Tryndamere the ability to stack his passive quicker, and then it gives him more damage when he actually has his passive fully stacked. What this means is that Tryndamere now has a reason to try and grind up as much Fury as possible to get to his maximum DPS threshold, and then he has to remain in combat in order to keep it. He doesn't have the bonus damage anywhere outside of maximum Fury, and as a result, if you're able to kite him out for even a little bit and wait for his Fury to start tapering off, he will lose a lot of DPS. It also means that then Tryndamere has a very obvious win condition in lane. If he walks in a lane and starts hitting minions, yeah, he'll get to maximum Fury very quickly, but it also means he did nothing but hit minions for the last 30 seconds, and that means his wave is going to push, therefore exposing him to ganks and allowing you to safely last hit under tower, which I think then gives him a lot more of a healthy laning phase. It does mean, however, that he's very dependent on getting up to that steroid as fast as possible. I've also moved the healing from Bloodlust here as well, where after X seconds, when Tryndamere has been outside of combat, he consumes his Fury to start healing. This then means that Tryndamere is less of a reactive healer and more of a sustain healer for an extended period of time in lane. He can do something like whack a bunch of minions to stack up a bunch of Fury, and then remain outside of combat in order to consume his Fury to heal himself. This keeps that sort of tension between Tryndamere wanting maximum DPS, but also needing to use his Fury in order to heal himself, which I think is a fun gameplay loop, but this disallows Tryndamere from being able to use it in the middle of a fight, and instead says, you can use this as sustain, but you're not going to have it probably in the middle of a team fight. I've also reworked Tryndamere's Q, as you probably could guess from the fact that I'm just not that big of a fan of Bloodlust, and all of Bloodlust functionality is now on his passive. Instead, Q is now an attack that hits enemies in a line, dealing damage and generating Fury for each champion hit. This can crit, and I don't think it's necessarily a problem if it applies on hit effects as well. Think of it like Yasuo Q, except with a thicker hitbox, because Tryndamere has a much bigger sword and is going to be a much more smashy character in general than Yasuo. This allows Tryndamere to help stack his Fury faster, which in this version is a very important steroid for him to get up to as fast as possible. This means Tryndamere can do something like spinning onto an enemy champion, going for like the auto attack Q into the reset, which because you hit the Q, you generate a bunch of more Fury immediately, giving you more attack speed, allowing you to stack faster. Because it can crit as well, there's even more Fury generation that you can have. In the middle of a team fight, you can spin into multiple enemy champions, hitting them all with the Q, potentially jumping you to maximum Fury immediately. There's a lot of things here that I like. It does keep Tryndamere as a very simple right-click focused champion, but it does give him some point of failure in the middle of a trade or in the middle of a team fight. If you whiff a Q, you absolutely can be missing out on a big chunk of damage and or Fury generation, making you significantly weaker overall. W I've also tweaked a little bit into now a cone in front of Tryndamere that slows and shreds AD in the area of effect, regardless of facing. I didn't want to fundamentally remove Mocking Shout. I think that there is some interesting gameplay between Tryndamere using W to slow a target so we can walk into range to E them, or Eing into range to slow the target so we can walk into range to start auto-attacking them. There are some things that I kind of like about the ability. What I dislike is just how large the area of effect is, and that there doesn't seem to be that much counterplay to it in general. The fact that you have to turn around to avoid the slow means that by the time you've seen the animation and know what Tryndamere is doing, it's already too late for you to avoid the slow. So I'd much rather just say, this is always what its functionality is, but the area of effect is much smaller, so Tryndamere has to pick a specific target, or maybe a gaggle of targets, and say, you are the ones that I'm going to make fun of, and reduce your AD and slow you, as opposed to, I'm in the middle of a team fight, so I'm just going to press this button, and everyone is now weaker because I guess they're scared of me or something. E and R I have not changed in the slightest. I think those abilities are totally fine. E, I do think it's a bit of a silly animated ability with having Tryndamere just spin his way forwards, but I don't know how you would better fix that in terms of animation, and I think the functionality of the ability is very fine. Finally, Undying Rage I quite like, especially if we maintain the functionality that it gives Tryndamere maximum Fury when he activates it, meaning that Tryndamere has the ability to pop R in the middle when he gets dove and immediately get to his maximum DPS threshold, which is quite nice. I do think that there could be some functionality where at the end of Undying Rage, Tryndamere automatically consumes all of his Fury to heal himself, a la his passive, therefore allowing Tryndamere to potentially not die even after Undying Rage wears off. I would be totally fine with adding that sort of mechanic to the kit as well. Overall, I think this then means that Tryndamere is still right-click focused, he's still going to be building Critical Strike, he's still going to be fine at split pushing, but it does give him a little bit more of an ability to participate in team fights. I think that because his W has been nerfed to a certain extent, you can make the slow and AD shred potentially stronger, and I think that it solves a lot of Tryndamere's issues in lane, where he's no longer random critting you. Instead, now there is an obvious place where he's very strong, and there's an obvious place where he's very weak, and it's up for the opponent to then exploit Tryndamere in those areas, and for Tryndamere to find a way to outplay his opponent to get to maximum Fury so he can win fights. But you guys love to let me know what you think of these changes down in the comment section below, especially if you're more of a Tryndamere player. I'm not like a massive Tryndamere aficionado, so definitely if you have better ideas for what this champion could do, I'd love to hear your ideas down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.